I started teaching a course here at Western Michigan University about disasters in Japan. I decided to include Godzilla just as a bit of a distraction from all the other kind of sad things that we're reading about earthquakes and disasters in Japan. I found out that there were these novelizations of the first two Godzilla films, which were written by the same fellow who wrote the screenplay for the very first two films. Why not translate this for our American fans? My students here at Western Michigan University have been really helpful. I would get their feedback on different drafts of the story, and a lot of the feedback that I got from the students went into the final product. The story of Godzilla is a little bit complex. The film was conceived of first in 1954 when some producers at Toho Studios decided that they wanted to do a film about a radioactive monster. Toho Studios took this idea to a popular science fiction writer by the name of Shigeru Kayama, and he pens the first draft of the screenplay. That screenplay was then massaged and changed and developed and turned into the 1954 film that we know now. I think the directors thought that perhaps making a protest film about nuclear weapons wouldn't, bring huge numbers of people into the theater. The science fiction writer who had first drafted the screenplay then returned to it the following year in 1955 and restored a bit of that kind of anti-nuclear protest that was, there in his mind from the very beginning. The novelization that I've translated has been published and republished over and over and over, countless times in Japan. I'm not exactly sure why it took so long to get an English translation of this. To me, it seemed obvious. The popularity of Godzilla continues to grow and grow over the decades. I think that one of the reasons that Godzilla is really interesting right now in our current moments in time is that we're living through this age in which we are highly aware of the fact that we are destroying the planet, that human beings are changing the environment. We are watching Godzilla come ashore in the form of climate change. In that regard, I think Godzilla is a perfect fable for the Anthropocene. If we read science fiction against the moment that it's created, we often make really interesting discoveries. I think that's the case with this Godzilla. It was reflecting this nuclear fear that was spreading across Japan like wildfire in 1954. Those were scenes that were specifically designed to evoke memories of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There are other scenes of Tokyo burning, which of course reminded people of the massive firebombing that took place in Japan in 1945. That environmental message, I think, has a renewed significance right now in our era of climate change, in an era when we're very highly aware of the huge destruction that humanity is having upon the natural world. The very mournful spirit and kind of heavy spirit of that original film, I think, was brought back in Godzilla -1. Really deals with those difficult questions of how do we pick ourselves up after a disaster. In many ways, it's most like the very first film. So directors, especially in the new MonsterVerse films that are being created in Hollywood, those films are themes are being brought to the surface once again.